Welcome back to another episode of Sports Medicine on Tap. My name is Brandon O'Line. I'm sitting at a full Neck of the Woods Brewing Company tasting room with my good friend Dr. Frey. Dr. Frey, how you doing?
I'm spectacular.
It's a beautiful day out. Right before we started the show, the sunset was blinding me through the windows at Neck of the Woods, so we're starting recording at the perfect time.
Yeah. Fortunately, I got here a little bit late.
It all works out, though. So we're on the beginning of summer, if you will. Memorial Day just went by. So how was your Memorial Day?
Spectacular. It was awesome. I like my storytelling.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into my story a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what you had done, and then I'll get into my story.
So for Memorial Day, my wife and I, we went to a good friend's wedding down in Banner Elk, North Carolina. So we were on the road a little bit. Took about a 9-hour drive down there.
Yeah.
Did a quick in and out business trip, if you will. We went down there, saw some friends, hung out at Airbnb for a little bit. Went down on Friday. Wedding was on Saturday. Came home Sunday to see the little one. So
quick.
We were quick,
strategic,
but it was a hell of a trip. It was a good time.
There have been times where I remember I was supposed to go out to see one of my buddies was getting married out in Arizona, and my flight got canceled, the original flight, and it was like a whole disaster. And the airline had screwed up, and I ended up spending more time in the air than I actually did on the ground in Arizona.
Yeah.
That part's brutal, right?
Yeah, that's what like it was my saving grace. It was like we were in North Carolina for longer than we were in the car, so it was a win in my book. So I was like, you know what, take it as it is, and it worked out.
So yeah, we had big plans. We were going up to had it all planned out, backpacking with my kids in the Catskills, and it's I think it really started probably like COVID, and we had talked about everyone was getting out, everyone was hiking a little more, the world changed itinerary, right? And we committed hey, before you guys graduate from high school, we should go spend a week on the Appalachian Trail. And all we were doing was a couple of day hikes. And I had never done any backpacking. I don't know what I was doing. I'd done some campsite camping growing up. But I actually did a ton of that. But never out in the woods, backwoods. I had no idea what we're doing.
Right.
So we decided we're going to build up to it. And I don't know if you remember last year, October, we did our first trip, something called the Batona Trail, which is in the Pinelands in New Jersey, which is an awesome trail. It's a BATONA. It's short for Back to Nature. And it's a 57-mile trail through the Pinelands. And it was great, man. We had an awesome trip. And I'm like, all right, here's round 2, our preparation, getting ready for the Appalachian Trail. And so we were going to go to Catskills, and I had it all mapped out to something called the Huckleberry Loop in the Catskills near Margaretville. And it's rated as a difficult hike, and I'm reading, and I'm like, I don't know, I think we could do it. And one of the big warnings there is that be careful about your water. The water situation is there aren't many places to refill water-wise. And you're in the woods, man. You're out there. And so I had it mapped out pretty well. You can actually do it. It's like a 13-mile hike or 14-mile hike, and some people do it in one day. Okay. We were like, we're going to break it up into 3 days, day 2 nights, 3 days, and we were doing little offshoots off of the actual trail to where we were going to try to set up and get water and all this other stuff. And it was hot, and it was muggy. And day number 1, I had a problem with my bladder and my backpack. I wasn't getting enough water, so I didn't really drink a whole lot of water day number 1. And we get down, and we don't quite go. It turns out where we were planning on camping was a little bit far from the water source, and we were like, you know what? This is a bad idea to keep going. We'll stop here. We'll set up camp here. And literally, set up camp. Right. So we plop down, set up camp. My daughter was having a little bit of a hard time. It was a lot more up and down and really tough hiking, more than I anticipated. So I took some of the load off of her, and I was carrying a little extra stuff. And we knew that campsite number 2, where we were going, we were going to set up where we're going to set up camp. The water supply wasn't for another at least 3/4 of a mile past that, way downhill and then way back up. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, if we don't run through all of our water, maybe I can get us through the night, cook with it and whatnot. And you're just setting up camp and and then we'll be good to go, just to exit tomorrow morning and not have to sweat it. So again, I'm not drinking a whole lot of water. I'm a freaking doctor.
We're the worst patients. Healthcare professionals aren't the greatest patients.
Right. So we're chugging along, and I'm not drinking water for the second day in a row, and I'm sweating like crazy, and I'm carrying all this extra weight, and we're going up and down and up and down and up and down. And we get to a crossroad at that point where it's either go to the right and kind of go to this offshoot where we're going to camp and stay another night, and we see the mileage, and it's it's not even that far at this point, but each mile is hard. These are
It's
easy
not
miles.
a straight flat mile.
No,
Absolutely.
these are hard miles.
Yeah.
And like it's every step, like it's rocks and whatnot, and like you're literally looking at the ground because you got to see where your foot lands every single step, otherwise you roll. And so 2.3 miles to be done, 2.6 miles to get to where the campsite is, and another 3/4 of a mile down and back up. Like to go get the water and then bring it back.
Right.
My son kind of wanted to stick it out. My daughter was like, I don't know. And I was like, we're going to go camping, just camping. Like in a few weeks, maybe we just call it right now. So we ended up going back. We did the loop in 2 days. We ended up heading back. And thank God we did, because I bonked. I had nothing. I was dehydrated.
Oh, yeah.
I was like on the edge of puking. And I think I was going into a little bit of keto, like my legs were, like muscles were breaking down and everything.
Yeah,
and
little rhabdo.
Little rhabdo. I'm sorry, that's the word.
Getting close. Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, legitimately.
Yeah.
And like I couldn't stand. I got home. I couldn't hold down. Like I was pretty bad. and all I could think was, if we had gone to camp, because like I'm the one who's doing the cooking, and like my son was helping a ton, my daughter was helping a ton, but like I'm holding down the fort, right? Like we were done, and like you're in the woods, like that's it. Like you're not getting out. Like this is why we're doing the practice runs before we do the real thing.
Yeah.
And we're not doing the whole Appalachian Trail, but we want to do a week. We want to do a week. And I'm just like, it was a reminder of just how bad things can go quickly when you're literally kind of out in the wilderness. You know what I mean? And so it was a nice weekend, but I got the smack down a little bit. I learned a lesson. Yeah.
Hey, I mean, I think that was one of those things where like you got faced with a challenge that was pretty hard.
Right.
You underestimated a little bit. You overshot your shot a little bit, but I mean, a lot of lessons learned, and I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like one of the things where like when you go through something that's really tough with other people, it's really connecting, and it's like that weird human nature. And you go through bad stuff together, you get closer to people. Yeah. It's just
and we got rained on Saturday night. Right? Like we got there, we're setting down, we're setting up, and all of a sudden, and you're laughing, right? Like it's like this is a miserable situation, but we're all laughing. Like and you're right. Like that kind of misery, the fun misery at that moment.
Yeah.
It was great. It was anyone who's interested, it is beautiful. Like I will say, that was a beautiful hike, and everything I read about it, like a hidden gem and this and that. It's hard. Like don't underestimate it. Yeah. But it is an absolutely beautiful hike. Yeah. And like one of the things I was reading, like every mile is different, and it's not quite every mile, but it's like the terrain and everything completely varied. You see a lot of stuff. Yeah. There are a couple cliff walks, which are scary. I have a fear of heights.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a real treat. We had our dog with us too. That was, and then there's there's a few pretty ridiculous climbs, a few ridiculous descents. The whole scenery, like there's some meadows, and then it changes in the rock. Like it's a very, very beautiful hike.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a really good time, and I didn't do much hiking out in the mountains of Banner Elk. We did go for a little walk on that one morning, and we stumbled upon a food truck festival. So it was like completely opposite of what you went. I walked into a bunch of food and water everywhere. And I walked my way back up the mountain, and I had no problems.
That's the beauty of the Batona Trail is that even though you're kind of in the wilderness, you kind of always feel like if you needed to, you could probably order a pizza. Like you're not
close enough to civilization. Right. Yeah, and I mean, that's awesome, though, and I think that's really fun. Like, when we were growing up, my dad took us out in the woods a lot.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, we did a lot of camping and different things.
A lot of learning.
And it was a lot of roughing. He's like, yep, you just get a tent and some sleeping bags, and we're going to cook by fire and figure it out. And
that's how it was. Yeah, exactly. Kind of stamping out where we're going to go, plop down the tent, set everything up, and it's cool. Yeah. It is.
That's a good time.
Speaking of food trucks.
Yeah.
Sourfest.
Yeah, we had Sourfest over here at Neck of the Woods. Unfortunately, we were unable to record a podcast during Sourfest like we were really planning for the whole leading up to it. It was, I think we pulled the plug on that like Friday night before the Saturday or whatever the case was.
I mean, it's for a good reason.
Right, for a good reason, which is like kind of a couple different things. So as mentioned many times before, I do work for Rowan University, and our softball team has been doing really well in our postseason, and we were hosting, I believe at that time, was the regionals of the NCAA tournament.
Right.
We ended up winning the weekend out, and we hosted the following weekend, which was super regionals, which might have been Sourfest, whatever the case was. But the weather was poor, so we had a rain delay in the game. So my whole plan of trying to do a little bit of work a little bit of softball, come to Sourfest and go to a family dinner all on the same day got washed by a rain delay that pushed into my Sourfest time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I couldn't do it, but again, good reasoning. Our softball team is now in the World Series down in Texas right now. So
good luck, Rowan.
Good luck to our ladies down there, and hopefully they come home with some hardware that's legit and the whole thing,
Yeah.
So it happens, it's just the nature of the beast, if you will, as an athletic trainer, right? We're at the mercy of weather sometimes.
That's just how it goes.
Even if, just my one big thing for Memorial Day weekend is I'm a former lacrosse player. I'm real big on the lacrosse championship, and it's always in our backyard at Link Financial Field.
Oh,
and I've said for years, I was like, I gotta go. And I always end up obviously making plans for Memorial Day.
Yeah.
But I always make a point to watch the championship game on Monday. And it worked out this year because there was a bunch of lightning in the area, so it got pushed.
It got delayed,
back.
yeah.
And it not that it was impossible to watch at noon, but it got pushed to like 2:00. And I was like, oh, this is great. I did a bunch of stuff, and I actually got to sit down and watch most of it. And goodness gracious, Notre Dame is really good.
Cavanaughs, yeah.
The Cavanaughs are unbelievable.
Right. Chris and Pat, right?
Yeah.
Like I think Pat's the older one who's feeds it to Chris, and he's just
back and forth. I
behind
think
the back.
One had like 5 goals, and the other one had 6 assists, and all of them were at least to his
goalie,
brother.
man.
And their goalie is a stud.
Right.
My goodness, he's so good. I don't think there was any big injuries in that game or anything like that, so that's always good to see. And I mean, good for Maryland. Unfortunately, lost, but being a number 7 seed going all the way to the championship, good for them.
They were. I think was it last year or 2 years ago was their really big year. They were
2 years
really
ago
good.
they won. 2 years ago they won. Right.
And then they were a little bit down. I don't think people expected them to be the team in the finals this year, but here they were. But they ran into a juggernaut, right? Notre Dame, second year in a row, winning it.
Yeah, and the craziest part about Notre Dame is that they hand every team, their worst loss in the season comes against them.
Right.
So you can do real good all year and only lose by maybe 2 goals against every other team across the country. You play them, you're getting stomped by 7.
It's a different
game. And it's like, it's tough.
Who did they lose to this year? They didn't have a loss.
They did have a loss, and I completely forget who. And it was like some crazy double overtime game or something like that. Or it was something. I don't think it was in regulation. I'm not sure, but someone did get their number. But I mean that happens. But
inevitably, yes.
Inevitably, it's going to happen.
Slip up here and there, whatever.
That team is really, really good.
I know. I think it's the younger Kavanaugh, which I'm pretty sure it's Chris, that is the goal scorer. So like this might not be over.
Yeah. Someone's got to feed him the ball.
Right.
And it was like, it's just crazy to see, like, in watching as a lacrosse fan and a former player, seeing the development of the sport in that now you have these college games in the NCAA tournament, and they're talking about these kids, what they're doing after now. They're getting drafted by the Professional Lacrosse League.
Right. Notre Dame has one of their football players on the team.
Yeah. Oh, that guy's also really good. He had a nice behind-the-back Faison or something. I think he had a behind-the-back goal in the championship game.
That's right.
And he's catching over-the-shoulder breadbasket catches in the
college
football. Like, kid's a stud. He's an athlete all across the board.
But then you're right. There were I think is he linebacker or something. There's one of the high end.
And it's just crazy to see now. Like as for me, like looking at the big picture of the sport, it's just like now these young kids get to see like, oh, that guy's going to go to the professionals now.
Yeah.
And I think I was watching an early game with Notre Dame, and I think they're playing Albany. I think they had like 6 guys already drafted into the next level, going into the PLL or the NLL, and they're all like doing all these things, which is awesome to see. Which is like before,
after lacrosse, after college,
I've been watching Memorial Day championship games for like 15 years now, and it was always like, oh, look at all their highlights from all they did in college. Like, no, look what they're about to do now. It's like just the conversation changes a little bit, which is nice to see.
For sure. It's a good sport.
Yeah.
It's a great sport. It's a fun sport, and it just continues to grow.
Yeah, and you can't compete with that, and it's really awesome to see. So with that being said, quick little word from our sponsors here at Virtual Orthopedics and Spine. They cover everything from runner's knee to dog walker's hip to yard work back and laptop wrist. They've got a doc for that. Find the right specialist for you at virtua.org/ortho. So, just a quick read from our sponsors. Like I said, if you play lacrosse and you need something that we're Italian, Virtua got the people for you.
Lacrosse injury?
Yeah.
They got a doc for that.
Yeah, they got a little something for that too. So, we talked about a bunch of stuff so far, and we haven't even touched on the topic.
Right.
With that being for our show tonight. A common injury. We're going to dive back into baseball a little bit and talk about Ronald Acuña Jr., who went down, who made headlines on Memorial Day weekend for the wrong reasons, and he got injured on Sunday, the 26th, against the Pirates. He hit a double. He was on second. He looked like he was trying to steal third. made an awkward twist and turn, and then went down holding his knee, his left knee, and then that's all she wrote.
Repeat customer.
Yeah, repeat customer.
We hate to have the repeat customers on the show.
And we've talked about him plenty of times before in different things.
Yeah.
He has, unfortunately, a pretty long list of injuries and injury history. In my research today, he's only played in 2 seasons of 119-plus games out of his 7-year career so far.
What a talent.
Like,
but a little bit fragile.
Yeah, and I mean, he kind of takes in the same breath as like our most talked about person ever, Joel Embiid. So much talent, but man, like sometimes he's made of glass and just gets injured a lot.
Stay on the court.
Just got to stay
the
healthy.
Field.
Just got to stay healthy, stay out there, and it's most effective. Although, interestingly enough, we said repeat customer, right? Ronald Acuña has had a history of ACL injury before, so he tore his left ACL this past Sunday. Back in 2021, he tore the right ACL.
We talked about it.
And we did talk about it.
Yeah.
And Atlanta went on and won the World Series that year.
Oh.
Not predicting that they're going to win the World Series, but history could repeat itself. You never know.
Right.
However, Atlanta's been on our radar a lot this year. We talked about Spencer Strider earlier, a month or so ago.
Right.
And that's their top guy going down with a big injury in UCL.
Yeah.
And now they're from the pitching rotation, and now you go for their field players, and then you take out the reigning NL MVP. You take them out of the equation. That's going to be a rough road.
Yeah. It would be a challenge, I would say.
Yeah.
Losing 2 guys of that caliber in the same season. But hey, like you said, in 2021 they lost Acuña, and they still somehow
found a way.
They pulled it off.
Yeah,
right.
And I think, like I read up a little bit about what they did in 2021, and like their front office made a lot of moves and some trades and some stuff to kind of get some key players to kind of fill some voids. He's not a replaceable person.
No,
you can't replace him. You're not replacing that speed and power combo and what he can do on the field, offensively and defensively. So I don't know what's going to happen with Atlanta now. I know when I was doing some such research for the show tonight, it just the first 10 articles was like trades that Atlanta should make to make up for a difference, or who's gonna fill in the void for Acuña. It's like that's not what I want right now. I just want to go dive into a little bit of his injury stuff here.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of get in the habit now in the show of we talked about ACL plenty of times. Let's just go right into it.
Right.
But we were looking at it before we started recording, and we really haven't had a ACL injury that we just focused on in a while. Last time we talked Spencer Lee, who was ACL deficient in both knees and still won a national championship. But just a little refresher, if you will, Dr. Frey. What do you think? Just let's go over the ACL a little bit, what it does. Obviously it's in the knee, and just some other things of what it does for the body and other things like that, and how it classically is injured and other things.
So first I'll say, I'm going to try not to spend quite as much time on it because we have gone down this road before, and I'd say listen to the previous episodes, probably the Ronald Acuña episode from 2021, right? When we're talking about his other knee, unfortunately. Yeah. But in general, it's a ligament within the knee, right? And the ligament is it's like a rope that connects 2 bones, one to the other. In this case scenario, it's connecting the thigh bone, the femur, to the shin bone, the tibia. And it connects. It starts off in the thigh bone, kind of right in the middle, but kind of near the back portion of the thigh bone, and it sort of traverses forward anteriorly towards the front of the shin bone. So if you can imagine a rope going from the back of the thigh bone to the front of the shin bone, it helps prevent the shin bone from sliding forward relative to the thigh bone, right? And then there's also a rotational component to that helps it not spin, but we're getting a little bit more detailed there. I think it's a very popular ligament to talk about because one, it's a fairly devastating injury. It's a pretty common injury. We see it all the time.
Very.
It's high profile, and people are out for a while. We've gotten very good at reconstructing these, repairing these also a little bit, and then actually things have even changed a little bit since 2021. Even with that, still with our best, recurrent tear rates are probably higher than we would want them to be in the perfect world. Tearing the contralateral knee shockingly is higher than you would ever expect it to be, and there's probably a few different reasons for that, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, given it's appropriate for today's show.
Correct.
It's the exact topic, right?
Yeah.
So essentially that's what it's doing. It's preventing the shin bone from sliding forward relative to the thigh bone. And very surprisingly, almost all of these, 80, 90% upwards, are non-contact injuries. Oftentimes non-contact pivoting injuries, we call them. And I think in most people's minds, you think like, oh, this guy just got clobbered, right? And he got taken out and it took out his ACL. But usually it's not. He goes to cut, pivot, turn, and
just something happens.
Down it goes.
And
yeah,
it's like similar to we talked about this past football season. Nick Chubb, who was a contact injury, multi-ligament injury to his knee. He tore his little different picture, and that's like what you were saying, like the contact, like he got smashed and his leg bent backwards, and he's like, that doesn't look good.
Right.
In this case, he was on second base. He took his first second approach,
grotesque,
and then he got caught up and did a little spin move. Now,
crumbled.
It was interesting to me in that like he turned his back to like the pitcher in the way he pivoted. Like
that is odd. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Like and. To me, it's like, I don't know. Like, you're supposed to keep your eye, like, where the ball's coming from.
Very
in theory.
surprising.
Like, so maybe if he planted with his right leg to go back, he wouldn't have had the issue. But he, like, turned his whole back and he hit his left. He planted with his left leg, and then it gave out, and he just dropped like a bag of bricks.
Right. It's another point, right? Like, baseball. Like, we don't see this as frequently in baseball players. Right. Like, it's a little bit unusual.
Often.
Right. Yeah.
And you think of the big names in the most recent years, You want to say maybe like Buster Posey back in the day, but he changed the rule for contact with the catcher at home
Wasn't
plate.
that his ankle? That was his knee? In my mind, it was his ankle.
I think, it might have been his ankle, but I know he has a history of ACL. That's why I might have messed the story up. Another big one was like Mariano Rivera tore his ACL shagging fly balls during BP one time. And it's like, again, you don't really see that in the game of baseball. I mean, Acuña back in 2021 was trying to catch a fly ball, and then he tore his right ACL.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? Like it kind of happens, and it doesn't happen, like we said, often, because it's not that baseball is not a dynamic sport and it doesn't have any lateral cutting or anything. It happens, but it's
a lot less common.
Yeah, a lot less common. Yeah. And, we're talking about recurrent injuries and contralateral injuries. Over the weekend so today's the 28th, so about a week ago, the 22nd, I hit my 15-year mark after my ACL reconstruction.
All right.
So far, no issues, knock on wood.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. Always something comes up every year. It's like, I got to do something to push my knee to make sure it still works good. So I did a 5K with my son in a stroller. So
congrats, man.
Yeah, it was a good time.
How'd it go?
Good. I mean, I do run decent. Once the weather gets nice, I get out a little bit more. And since I become a dad, I've learned the way of running with a stroller, which is run a lot slower.
Yeah.
But
who cares?
But he goes out. He loves it.
That was my next question. Does he dig it, or is he like climbing out of the stroller?
No, he just hangs out. Give him some snacks in his little food tray, and he just eats, and he just gets pushed like a king, and he has a good time.
My next door neighbor, he's an awesome guy. They moved in 2 weeks after we moved in, and he has 3 girls. And they're all very similar age to my 2 kids. Mm-hmm. And we used to be running down the street together, and I'd have the double and he'd have the triple, and we'd be 5 wide pushing it, like get out of the way.
Yeah, it's definitely fun, and I'm looking forward to, like we said, the summer now. And I get last year we did a lot. I would go down to Ocean City, run the boardwalk with him, and get him a little snack, and then he'd just take a nap. He was napping way more back then, so he'll probably be way more interested in all the arcades and stuff this time around. But hey, it's going to
be a tougher sell. You might have to stop.
Yeah. So back to what we were talking about with that little snippet there. Acuña injured his right ACL back in 2021. Right. What I did find, which is interesting in this searching of his injury history, back in his rookie season in 2018, he missed 1 month with a quote-unquote mild ACL sprain and a bone contusion to the same left knee.
The plot thickens.
So I was like, whoa, that's a little interesting tidbit there.
For sure.
It's only about 6 years ago.
Yeah. I think this is an appropriate time for us to talk about the fact that we don't have access to his medical charts. We're not revealing any actual information about him that's not already public.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
I found this on sportingnews.com or something like that, and they just kind of laid out all his timeline of different injuries. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, he's only had 2 seasons where he's played over 119 games of his 7-year career, and in that 7 years, every year he had the ticket of some kind of injury, something. I wasn't going all through the wrist and back and the hips and stuff, but we were just focused on his knees, and it's not his first time that left knee has caused some issue.
So I think it was literally maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago. It might have been the 100 episode where Dr. Bernardini, where Brad brought up, he's like, I don't believe in partial tears, and the sprains and blah blah blah, and this would be sort of a testament potentially to that, right?
Right, exactly.
Just how bad was that injury? Is it going to be a bigger problem for him later on? I don't necessarily agree with that statement entirely. I think that some people do have like a mild tear or a mild sprain or a partial tear, and then you can rehab it and they can get better and they don't have any problems. But yeah, that is certainly.
And it's interesting.
It's
significant. Like he missed a whole month, about 4 weeks with it after he, the mild ACL sprain. But then he came back and played. He played 111 games that year, so it was definitely not in the 119 plus that I've been mentioning.
Right.
But he won Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
And he still did really well.
Yeah.
And he was reigning NL MVP last year.
Right. And he has a game very much based on speed. So clearly he still has a lot of speed.
Right.
Despite that injury and despite the injury to his right knee, the tear, and recovering from it.
Yeah.
So, we also talk about like risk factors, right? What are some risk factors for tearing your ACL? I don't think it's an intuitive thing. You would think it's bad luck, whatnot, but there is definitely, and without question, a genetic component, right? Like some of the risk factors are like female, right? Like females tear more frequently than males. That is like by far, right?
Well studied and well proven that's very
well
much
documented,
true.
right? Another risk factor. There are some risk factors, what we call neuromuscular risk factors, and those were modifiable to some extent. And that was the genesis of the Energy Lab, to try to work on some of these risk factors to reduce the risk factors for these types of injuries. Either before the injury happens or after the injury happens, but before the person is back out on the field, right? So try to reduce the risk of re-tearing the same knee or a tear in the other knee.
Right.
One of the really insane statistics in my mind when it comes to ACL tears, is that, depending on what you read and depending on when you read it, it's kind of all over the map, the re-tear rate. So if you tear, let's say your right knee, in Ronald Acuña's case, if you tear the right knee, your chances of re-tearing that right knee are higher than the average population in just randomly tearing their right knee. And depending on what you read, it's as high as 20% at different times. And also depends on what they had repair-wise. Was it reconstructed? Was it a repair? There's a whole nother road to go down, a whole nother controversy. What was it reconstructed with? If it was reconstructed, allograft from a cadaver, autograft from that person.
Correct. Yep.
Which version of autograft? Was it the quad tendon? Was it the patella tendon? Was it the hamstrings? Right. So all of those factors factor in re-tear rates. But some of I think the older stuff, which has older data in it, it's probably upwards of 20% of re-tear rate. I think nowadays that number is probably trending now a little more towards 7-10%, but still higher than you would like to admit, right? But then for the contralateral knee to be 10%. Something is going on there. That person was predisposed. There's no way that person wasn't predisposed. I don't know. To me, that's a mind blowing.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because like you said, it's you tore your ACL. Bad time, wrong place, wrong time. Yeah. Unfortunate, your foot got stuck, whatever the case is. But then it's then it's studied and it's wait a minute, then they're at risk for the other leg just because.
Yeah.
And
it's something that they're doing.
Yeah, and it's and
we know some of it.
Right. So with that being said, I took a quick dive in some research, which is I'll try to find some systematic reviews or something that with some high level of evidence to kind of talk about tonight, and to kind of go back a little bit. It's almost a 10-year-old study now. The 2015 systematic review was talking about that re-tear rates was about 7.9% at the time of the study, and then the contralateral limb was at 12.5%, which is 1.6 times higher risk. Just because you had surgery on the other one, the other ones are just almost double the risk of having it happen there. Yeah. It's holy cow.
Yeah, some people who are more quad dominant tend to be at a higher risk as opposed to people more hamstring and kind of glute dominant in the way they carry their weight. People that collapse into what we call valgus, like jump testing and the way that they land, at a higher risk. Even the morphology of their knee, the slope of their tibial plateau, or what we call a little narrower notch, and there's a number of different factors that and some of them are just they are what they are. Yep. This is how you're built. This is how it's going to be. But some of them are modifiable. Some of them can be improved upon.
Yeah, and you talked about some things that you're just built with, like we mentioned before, females are at higher risk, and typically females have what's called a higher Q angle, which their hips are a little wider, which means their femurs come down more, which makes like a upside down triangle going down, if you will, and that puts your knee in that valgus position, which is susceptible for ACL tears. And then it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And anatomically, women are a little bit more susceptible to it. But why is their other knee suddenly susceptible after they tear the, it's just like, it's crazy that it's even a thing, but it's also interesting that it's relatively well studied, and that we have some stuff that's like, oh man, we should look at this. We should do a lot of preventative stuff. Yeah,
here we are, professional athlete, top of his game, reigning MVP, and
still can happen
to him. Right?
And it's like,
why isn't that prevented?
Why him? Where like this, I'm gonna just make a broad assumption here that he's a professional athlete, right? He's probably relatively busy in the weight room. He works out all the time. He's playing kind of in the beginning third of the season, if you will. Like they're really kind of getting after it, almost. Like it's not like he's been doing nothing for 6 months and just wanted to go play a pickup basketball game and something happens. Like, this guy's a well-conditioned athlete, and he just goes to try to take a couple shuffles and plants and twists, and that's it.
Yeah, not a weekend warrior.
And it wasn't even like
condition.
I think we even talked about it. It wasn't like a high velocity play. It was very low energy. It was just like kind of hop skip and just a quick twist and that's it.
And down he goes. And then it's too late.
Right.
And like, oh man, what does this mean for this poor guy? It's hard enough. And the margin of error, and we actually talked a little bit about this when we covered the show, when we covered Ronald Acuña Jr. The first time around. But like, it's one thing to be able to get back to your sport. It's another thing to be able to get back to your sport at the same level of play after these injuries.
Right.
And the ability to get back to the same level of play, once you get to that high upper echelon level, is actually a lot more dismal or abysmal than you would think, right? It's on a professional level, like I don't know, 25% of the time they get to that same level, and amazingly, clearly he did it, right? He just won a freaking MVP. But now it's his other
almost
knee.
like, and I think with the timing of it, just kind of shows like how it works, right? Like he tore in 2021. He came back in 2022. He had 2022 and 2020.
Missed a little bit of the season, right?
Yeah, he came back in April of 22. But then, which is also interesting of like, how things work, is that it could be argued that he came back a little too quick, because in the following month he injured his groin and his quad. Which leg it was, I'm not sure, but it just I saw it come up and I was like, see, he's trying to compensate, overdo a little bit, do a little too much too soon, and next thing you know, you get these soft tissue injuries.
Second injury. I believe 100%. Totally on board with that.
And so it's like, okay, well now we're dealing with that, but then he takes that time of like the 2022 season to kind of probably just get his timing back under him or whatever the case was. Then 2023 he goes crazy.
He's the man again.
He's back on it and everything's fine and everything's going well and he's well conditioned and trained and everything's smooth sailing. NL MVP.
And there are people that argue it's really a 2-year injury. Like so oftentimes when we do reconstruction, it's a little different for repairs, bare technique. There's still some data out there. There's some question marks, but some promise, right? I'll just leave it at that. But when we do reconstruction, we're essentially taking a tendon and turning it into a ligament, right? And then your body has to figure out, or the ligament basically has to figure out, or the tendon has to figure out, like the graft, like, hey,
what are you doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here? I'm not supposed to be ligament. And it does. It turns over into a ligament. So, the first 3 months or so are really just that tendon kind of healing to bone, and then after that, the ligamentization process begins. And it really is about a 2-year remodeling process till it fully is like ligamentized. It would be the right word. So timing wise, like he was finally there at 23, like doing pretty well, like kind of getting fully 100% back to normal, and then the big setback.
And it's like it's tough because so now like if you kind of go with this model, if you will, based off his healing history and what his rehab was like previously,
right?
He gets hurt. I think the first time it was in July, so now he's hurt a little earlier in May. Maybe he comes back to start next season, but he's going to be a little bit of a shell of himself, not have that extra step. He's probably not stealing 40-some plus bases or whatever the case was, whatever he did.
Right. Although I got to say, when he came back, he looked really good. Although he got hurt quickly, but he looked really good. Whoa.
It's crazy when just it can happen. And so you're hoping that he comes back for the start of next season, and then maybe next season is an adjustment and trying to get his feet back under him. And then so we're looking at 2026 repeat being really good and kind of full. barring any other setbacks or anything
But
else.
at that point, like I remember when we talked about it the last time, it was like this amazing young player who's got the world ahead of him, and he's still this amazing player who has the world ahead of him. He's not as young anymore.
Yeah, he's
he's not old. He's definitely not old, but he's not.
But he's already, like, what I'm talking about. It's like I'm what I just discussed was like his 10th year in the big leagues.
Right.
So it's like, how long can you be a really good baseball player in the Major League Baseball?
Right.
It's hard to do. It's a game of failure, right?
Right.
You got to fail 7 out of 10 times to be a Hall of Famer.
That's
which
right.
Is, and then you to have the longevity to keep that going. It's like, I don't know. Let's kind of see what happens with him.
Yeah.
And we wish him the best, obviously, with everything. But again, I think with these high-level athletes, they have the ability to come back faster because they have everything at their fingertips, and they have all the access to all the professionals and everybody, all the athletic trainers, all the physical therapists, all the doctors. Everyone's there at their mercy pretty much, and they're in the facility every day.
Yeah.
So that's
we
helpful.
talk about that all the time.
All the time, right.
Yeah. I really wonder some of the things like one, they're like I was saying, there's, we're voyaging down the road of repair again. I would highly, highly, highly doubt that he had his first one repaired, and to be honest with you, I would highly doubt that he has this one repaired as well. I think in all probability is going to go tried and true reconstruction, right? And maybe 5 years from now it's a different conversation. We're just not. I don't think it's quite there yet for someone on this level, right? That's number one. So number two. One of the other crossroads here is like, so if you're going to reconstruct it, are you use his own tissue or are you going to use a cadaver tissue? And I have to imagine they're using his own tissue. Up to the age of 25, pretty much we always go that route. 0% disease transmission, lower re-tear rate. It just makes the most sense, right? Once you get over the age of 25, maybe 30, then it becomes a little bit more of a gray area. And then once you get over the age of 35, 40, then you start going cadaver tissue.
Yeah.
But so I'd imagine they're going to use his own tissue. So the question becomes, which one? There's three: the quad tendon, patella tendon, and hamstrings.
Yep.
And I got to imagine it's either going to be tried and true, old gold standard of patella tendon versus quad tendon. The other thing that we're doing now, which I think is a little bit different than what we're doing, and we talk about it all the time. I bring up Arthrex all the time, right? So we're adding an internal brace to the ACL reconstruction. Right? One of the things that was thought to potentially help the possibility of the ACL repair do well. There's this thing called a barrier implant. It's like a little collagen implant that you can sew in there when you're doing the reconstruction. And then like we get stem cells, the PRP, and this and that. But then you would also add this something called the internal brace, which we talk about it for
the
UCL injury. Yep. We talk about it for MCL injuries. Not doing it for ACL injuries. So it's basically you put it in slightly loose, just so you're not what we call stress shielding. So you want the tendon that's going to become a ligament to experience some stress. That's what it responds to, and that's how it gets strong. But you don't want it to experience too much stress.
Correct.
So you put it in just a tiny bit loose, and it helps people get back probably slightly more quickly, right? Like so, if that graft is experienced a little more stress than it may be ready to handle, it's got this backup brace that will then unload it at that particular point. And so that's one of it's technology, man. It just keeps getting better. If you asked me about this in 2021, I'd say, I don't think so. But here we are now 3 years later, his other knee. If he didn't have it before, I'm pretty sure he's probably getting it this time around.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Like it's the kind of the new trendy thing, if you will, that internal bracing is.
We're bracing, internal bracing, everything.
You hear for everything, and I think the more and more professional athletes do it, it's going to cause a shift in how the public views it. Very similar to like whatever year it was when Adrian Peterson came back in 9 months and won the rushing title after his ACL.
Yeah, he made it hard for us stops.
He makes it very hard. It's like, oh no, I got to get back in 9 months. I'm going to be out there running 3,000 yards. Like that's
Slow
Adrian
down,
Peterson.
buddy.
He's a freak of a person. Like he's not a natural.
And he
that's
did
not
it
normal.
in fewer than 9 months. They're like videos at like whatever it was, 4 months or 6 months of him doing this crazy stuff, and then everybody
everyone thought that was it.
That's what I'm going to do too.
But like we mentioned before, the risk of you tearing your ACL while you're in that position in the first place is because of some things that are out of your control. It's just naturally how you were made. Like your hips were made a certain way, your body does this, or your whole family's made that way, and everybody in your family has ACL tears. And it's just like just do at one point in time. It's kind of part of your family history a little bit,
That's right. Slow it down.
Slow down.
Correct it. Give it time to strengthen, like before you have a problem.
And I think he avoids some of the things, like obviously it's a male athlete. He's not a female. He doesn't have the hip issue with the Q ankle and other things like that. So it's not a risk factor he might have to deal with. Other things that are associated with higher risk factors of tears is like, being young. He's over 18. I think he's like 26, 27 years old.
Yeah.
BMI, he's in shape. He's not like a obese someone like that. So he has a lot of things going for him in the right direction.
Of course.
Of like getting back well, but timeline of it would be interesting. I think. What do you think? What do you think when he comes back? It's May now.
It's May now. Yeah. So timing wise, I think let's do the math real quick. I think he actually shows up to spring training.
Spring training. Yeah. I think I'd agree
and I think they go really slow with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if he plays a full spring training schedule, but I think he's there. I think he's in camp. He's progressing. He's doing some stuff timing wise. It's not a redo on the same knee. It's the other knee, right?
So it's a whole new ball game.
Right, and I hope there's just a lot of time dedicated to injury prevention.
Yeah,
right?
Biomechanics, functional movements.
The jump training, the
jump
biometrics.
training and things like that.
The landing, the trying to get away from quad dominant, which he probably is, and more to this hamstring dominant.
Mm-hmm.
Just the different things that could potentially protect him from having another issue.
Right.
But, I don't remember his name, I hate to say it, but the running back for the Redskins back in the 90s who had torn both his ACLs, and he was really good. And everyone was blown away. Like, how can this guy be out there doing what he's doing? For Acuña to come back and do it now, I think would be less of a miracle as that was.
Yeah.
But still, like 2 ACLs, both knees, like we may be seeing the beginning.
Yeah,
of
and
the end
it's
here.
not, and it's not to say that there's not I don't know how to say it, but like that's if all goes well.
Right.
There's always the underlying and like kind of just pushed under the rug, inherent risk of infection when it comes to surgery. Like something could crazy happen, or just things that aren't the same when you're after surgery. Like you're gonna have some onset of knee pain or different things, which is gonna swell up after a game or something like that,
These little things
add up, and then now you're dealing with both knees, where it's like, I tore my ACL 15 years ago, and there's days where it's like, yep, I definitely that knee is definitely not the same how it was when nature made me. That's it. It's just, there's some days it aches, and some days, so you got to do that with both knees now. It's you got to hope that your previously reconstructed knee is now your good knee. Yeah. It's going to hold strong the whole time you're doing your rehab for your other knee. It's like
that's got to be.
If you have a bad day with the other one, then you're only on two bad legs. You got two bad wheels.
I just realized it called them the Redskins instead of the Commanders, but that's actually what the team's called at that point.
That's fair.
That's right?
Appropriate historical reference, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
But
anyway.
It's interesting to see. I think we kind of touched on a little bit of everything for this.
I would argue that like if I wish I could remember the name of that running back, but if you're that running back, if you got runner's knee, if you got dog walker's hip, back to Virtua. They got a doc for that.
They got a doc for it, right?
Yard work, back, your back's acting up, what have you, your shoulders bothering you, doesn't matter. They got a doc for that. So for Virtua Orthopedics and Spine has over 120 providers, over 20 PT and rehab facilities, and more than 25 surgical centers all across South Jersey. And they are some really great centers. I know, I work in them. And then find the right specialist for you at the virtua.org/ortho.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So if you have any of these unfortunate injuries or you're non-contact, you feel a pop in your knee, give Virtua a call. They're going to help you out with that.
You bring up a very good point, and something that for athletic trainers out there, and this is stuff that they know. And for the general layman, like it's that pop, right? Like high percentage of people. If they have that injury, especially that non-contact pivoting injury, if they have the buckle moment and they hear or feel the pop, very high percentage. Yeah.
So it's funny you say that. I'm pretty sure that I read in one of the articles that post game of that after he injured it on this weekend. He goes, it's crazy. I didn't feel a pop or nothing this time.
Is that what he said? Really?
That's what he said prior to the MRI. He goes, it just feels like weaker.
Did he hear the pop in 2018?
I don't know. Right? It's been popped the whole time.
Right.
Who knows? But so we'll see. We'll see what happens. This is one of those things where we'll kind of touch back on. And we'll kind of see where it goes. And as a Phillies fan, you don't want to see the Atlanta Braves do well, but
I know you never want to.
But you don't want to see them do poorly because of this. Exactly.
And this is just like an incredible talent and one of the best 2 or 3 baseball players.
And you don't
want to
see those
now.
those guys who are the faces of the sport in this generation of kids and like the future of it go down like this.
Yeah,
you don't want to see when anybody who's these top stars going down, because you want to see what they can do and how much of a phenom they really are.
The irony is that we spent 10 minutes on the introduction talking about lacrosse, which may be the sport that leads baseball down the wrong pathway.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately.
So before we go ahead and close out our tab, we just want to give another quick shout out to Virtual Orthopedics, one of our sponsors, Neck of the Woods Brewing Company, pouring us up the best beers in the local area in South Jersey, and Timber Reel Productions helping us get this video, audio, and everything out for this podcast to all our awesome supporters and listeners. So everyone have a safe day and safe evening wherever you're listening from, and we'll see you next time.